Ah, the tangled webs we weave.
What's going on, y'all? It's David David, and we are back with another Borderlands 3 character build video for Amara. I like to call this build the Plague Witch Amara because we sacrifice our elemental burst damage for damage over time status effects. If you like this build, please make sure to drop me a like and to subscribe to the channel. I appreciate the heck out of each and every one of you just taking the time to even watch this video. If you leave me a comment, I'll also make sure that I reply to every single one of you awesome people out there. So starting it off, I'm going to first go over the skill tree, and we're going to start with the Fist of the Elements tree to put 5 points into Anima. This is the main focus of our build because we are aiming to maximize our DPS with status effects. Next, we can put 5 points into Tempest for some nice increased elemental damage. We can also go over and slot 5 points into Wildfire because this is going to help us spread our status effects to increase our damage over time to enemies. Now, we can go down to put 1 point into Dread because this skill is just way too good for any Phase Grasp variation of Amara. It gives you extra damage as well as refilling your clip on kill. We can also go down and put 1 point into Deep Well for the increased magazine size for our elemental weapons, as well as 3 points into Catharsis because when we kill an enemy they'll explode and help spread our elemental damage and hopefully our status effects to nearby foes. On line 5, I like to put a point into Sustainment for that nice added lifesteal, and then lastly I like to put 5 points into Conflex because this is going to randomly apply a status effect to enemies that already have a status effect. And since we have Anima and Wildfire, those status effects are going to have more DPS and last longer, giving it more chances to spread to other enemies and then randomly inflict them with other status effects with Conflex. So now on the Mystical Assault tree, I like to put 5 points into Do Harm so we do more damage with our action skill, as well as put 5 points into Violent Tapestry to increase our chance of applying status effects on enemies. On line 2, I like to maximize Restless because our action skill cooldown rate is super efficient and useful to have for a Phase Grasp build. And now we can go down to the 4th line where I like to max out Laid Bare because if we Phase Grasp an enemy or enemies, they take increased damage not only from our guns, but more importantly from our action skills. We can also pick up 2 points into Wrath here for some nice added gun damage for our build. And finally, we can put 2 points into Remnant because if you watch my other video on my Electric Boogaloo Amara build, you'll see how absolutely insane this skill is. I'll leave a link to that video in the upper right corner up there. And as for our action skill and augment, I think that Ties That Bind is the best here because it really helps with our damage output. You can use it with Allure for the CC or Revelation for more damage, but I like using it with Soul Sap because this build really lacks survivability. For the element, you can pretty much use whatever, but I chose to use Incendiary because flesh enemies are just so common. And that is going to wrap it up for the skill tree. I'll leave the gameplay for one of my more recent Slaughter Shaft runs with negative modifiers with this build going in the background while I go over the few pieces of equipment for this build. I aim to get the negative modifiers to showcase to you guys that have negative gun damage and negative elemental damage because I really wanted you to see the effectiveness of the status effects and the damage over time DPS. And now I'll go over what gear I used and what gear you can use that will be extremely effective. I just used a simple Corrosive Cutsman as my main weapon. The one I used comes with additional shock damage on action skill and reload, but since we are just a status effect build and not an elemental damage build, I didn't really care too much for it. A better anointment would be something that buffs your status effect damage or chance for a short period on action skill end, just like this Hellwalker that I have. I mainly use the Cutsman to apply corrosive to enemies and deal melting damage over time to hopefully spread the status effects with my skills. The next part of this build that I used that coincides with the Cutsman I had was the Flesh Melter artifact. This artifact has a great ability that increases our corrosive damage after we kill an enemy with corrosive, and it also comes with increased shock damage, which means it is a great pair with the Cutsman that I chose. Although, I think that the most important piece here is that the action skill cooldown rate, because we really need to be able to Phase Grasp as much as possible to lay down some CC and apply status effects easily. If you're looking for a replacement artifact, any artifact will do honestly, just aim for one with action skill cooldown rate on it and possibly an elemental buff. Next up is our class mod, which is actually pretty vital for this build, but it is also a flexible slot because Amara's class mods are fantastic generally. The class mod I used was the Elementalist, which applies your action skill element to all enemies affected by your action skill, even the ones that are chained with ties that bind. This really helps us easily spread our status effects, and this particular mod I have comes with very useful skill points. It comes with 2 into Conflux to apply other status effects, 2 points into Wildfire to help us spread them, and it comes with 1 point into Violent Tapestry to help us apply them. Nimbus and Phaserker are other notable class mods that can do just fine for this build. Nimbus can be good for an elemental damage build, and Phaserker can be used for a more action skill oriented damage build. These next 2 pieces of the build are very open to exchanging. I just used the Resonant Backhand Shield for mainly just the terror applying, and I used this Corrosive Grenade for the Terror Skull's Anointment. Since this build is lacking in burst damage, the skulls really help us deal with phase grasp targets, and it also really fits this witch theme that I was going with. Other notable options for these 2 slots are any shield and grenade mod that you prefer really. Anointment combos like this are just generally good. Also, if you'd rather go without the Terror Skulls and instead go with like an ammo regen anointment or like a damage reduction anointment, that would work just as fine as well. And that, my friends, is going to wrap it up for my Plague Witch Amara build. If you're bored of using maximum DPS builds or looking for something fresh and pretty fun to use, then go ahead and try this bad boy out. Most of the components are pretty easy to throw together since the gear is rather flexible and the bulk of the build is really based around your skill tree. If you need a piece of this build on PS4 or just have any questions about it, go ahead and drop me a comment below and I will make sure to reply to you and hopefully help you. Even if I don't have an extra of something that you need, someone else might. I have actually gotten a good amount of help from the people in YouTube comments, so I'll definitely take advantage of that, even if you're on Xbox or PC, because someone there might be able to help you. Make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of my future content, and I will check you all in the next video. See ya!
Opposites attracted, magnetic and irreplaceable. Picture perfect, photogenic, doused diminished. Yes, I'm finished acting like nobody has my back. Girl, you told me that I'ma keep you steady on your path, so I'm no